Okay, let's see what we just did. Let's see what we just did. Hello. Sorry about that. Yes, I am here. That was I accidentally quit the broadcast program. In case you're wondering what happened there, but I am here, and you are there, and therefore it works. At least I'm hoping so, but I believe that is all the way it should be. So, hello, good evening. It is a few minutes after 7 o'clock California time here on this October the 9th. And I'm Tad. I'm going to be reading. And I apologize for the confusion there. As I said, I always have to go and set things up at the very beginning once it tells me now you can go live. And then I do, and I put the URLs, the links to things. And I did all of that and was trying to quit the browser, the internet browser, to come back to this particular program. And I accidentally quit this program. So there we were. And I had to quickly start it all over again, which is maddening, especially when you're already feeling a little stressed. But then again, I'm always feeling a little stressed these days. What's the line in the first Avengers movie? That's my secret. I'm always angry. I'm not always angry, but my secret is I'm always stressed. Unfortunately, unlike the Hulk, it is not the link to any great secret power. It's just a linkage to more stress. So anyway, hello, good to see you. And it's good to be here, and everything is pretty much the way it should be, except for those small mistakes there at the beginning. Deborah is back, so Johnny is convinced that he has saved our marriage. He was so happy. You should have seen a big dog Johnny when Deb came back, and Deb was sitting on the floor of one of the rooms doing some of her fabric art. And I came in, and Deb and I were saying hi to each other, and Johnny was just, he was down on the floor next to her, and he was thumping his big old tail on the floor. Thump, 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 thump. Like he'd personally brought her back, like he'd fetched her, like a shot duck or something. As I said, for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I was saying on the reading last night that Johnny, because of Deb and I going in and out, because we're helping to take care of my dad, and that they're at my parents' house. Johnny is worried that one of us always seems to be gone, which is not true. But I mean, we do, both of us go, from time to time. Usually only one of us at a time. And so Johnny's very worried. I don't know what he's like when I'm not here. I expect it's much the same, but definitely I can tell you when Deb's not here, he keeps looking over at me like, "What did you do? What did you do to her? Did you say something stupid?" He's very worried. And part of this, of course, is because Johnny, more than most dogs, and this is saying something, Johnny is very pack-oriented. He has been nervous ever since two of the kids moved out this summer. And he whenever anybody leaves the house to go shopping or whatever, he's very worried and fretful about that until they come back. So I'm constantly having to who knows? Maybe it's all in my mind, but I feel as though I'm constantly having to reassure him that things are actually okay and that we're all aware of this strange state of affairs and it's nothing permanent and et cetera, et cetera. Yes, as you can guess, I talk to the dogs way too much. Anyway, so here I am. There you are. We seem to be reestablished. We've gotten most of our people back. So what am I going to do? I'm going to read tonight. Before I read, do I have anything particular to talk about? I was explaining last night, again, or early this morning, depending on how you want to view these things, about the... I'm in a Zeno's paradox of the ending of this book, which is that every time I think I'm literally almost finished, it recedes slightly. Zeno's paradox, I mean, you all know what that is. If you don't know, it's this idea. It's the Achilles and the tortoise race, where Achilles, takes a huge long stride while the tortoise is going very slowly. But every one of Achilles' strides is half the length of the previous one. And of course, the paradox is that he, in fact, never will reach the finish line, whereas eventually the tortoise will. Anyway, in the same sense, it feels a bit like that with the book because there's so much to be resolved. And I knew this coming into it. So I started resolving things back in the beginning of this volume, which is now almost 1,000 pages long. Within the first few chapters, there are several surprises or explanations of things that I think will be surprises that people would have been waiting for since the first book, or maybe even in some cases earlier, back into one of the previous books. So as a result, I thought I had it handled, but in fact, I've got so much stuff. So every time I think I'm almost finished, and then I suddenly remember, oh wait, there's that plot line, and I have to thread that back in, and that has to have a resolution. Anyway, so it's nuts, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. But I will finish it. I'm exaggerating a little bit when I refer to it as Zeno's paradox, because there will come a point at which I will actually get done, and I can see it hovering now in the distance. But it's going to be a long fourth volume, and considering that originally this and Into the Narrow Dark were supposed to be one single volume, my only response is, what the hell was I thinking? Because it's already, as I mentioned last night, it's already longer than To Green Angel Tower, if you had put the two books together. Fortunately, I think this fourth volume will not be as long as To Green Angel Tower. Oh, God, what have I done to myself? Anyway. Okay, so I'm saying anyway a lot tonight, but that's the only appropriate word for some of these things. So with that, I am going to pop in and say hello to a few people, and if I think of anything else to tell you besides about the woes of our dogs and the woes of me as a writer, which are only barely distinguishable from each other, because they mostly just have to do with, I don't get it, which is true for both dogs and me. Anyway, so I'm going to do that. There, I said it again. I am going to check in and say hello to people, and then I will start reading and see if I can get a goodly chunk read tonight. Because as I recall, I had to stop in the middle of a chapter, although it was a nice place to stop. It was an actual end of a section. Anyway, so let's go and check in. So Barban, hello, good evening. Yes, the video did reset, and as I explained at the beginning, so I hope everybody's figured that out now. And can get back to the page and where they originally contacted it and try again. Tim, hello, happy Canadian Thanksgiving. Wow, is it that already? I was not aware. So thank you. Happy Canadian Thanksgiving back to you. V, hello. I'm glad you've been looking forward to this, and I'm going to do my best to provide it for you.
Do you have food?
Deb's ordering something. So that was one of our young people checking in to see if I was being fed tonight. I don't think I've ever had to do that before, actually address somebody off screen. Anyway, so Tim, again, thank you. And V, hello, I'm glad you've been looking forward to it. I hope it was worthwhile. Emily, hello. 5 days away from your first guest of honor at CanCon in Ottawa. Ooh, how exciting. That's very cool. I'm very pleased for you, Emily, and I hope you have a great time. I've never been to Ottawa. I don't know anything about it as a city. I know that they have a professional hockey team. I know that it's the seat of Canadian government. And that's about it in terms of what I know about Ottawa. So I apologize for my ignorance, but I'm sure there are cool things to do there. And obviously, being guest of honor at a con is a big deal. So excellent. Congratulations and enjoy it. And let us know. Come back and let us know how it went and what the highlights were. Ron, hello, Ron. More Binnebik and Canuck sayings tonight. Yeah, I think so. I think there probably will be some. Since Binnebik has just stepped back into the story after a very brief hiatus and grabbed Simon off the field of battle while he and the Rimmersmen were being attacked by Buchan. Jared, good evening, good evening. Yes, we are doing as well as can be expected, and thank you very much for the kind thoughts. Sarah, hello, checking in from Frankfurt. Very early morning in Frankfurt. My God, yeah, it must be. What is it, 9 hours difference to Frankfurt? That's too early for me. Isaac, hello, hello, good to see you, as always. Robert, we are here, says Robert. And that could be any number of people. That could be Robert and the hidden puppet masters. Who knows who's speaking through Robert? We can only wonder. Susan. Hello, Susan. Good evening. Thank you. And thank you for reading, she says, and talking about life. Well, I'm not talking about normal life or even anybody sensible's life. I'm talking about my life. And I'm leaving out most of the details because most of them are boring as hell. But that's what life is, isn't it? The rest of them are things like cleaning the cat box and making sure you pick up the cans and get them into the recycling bag and, that kind of thing. But anyway, thank you. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Nicole, bonsoir. Good to see you. Ron, again. Hey. Ron says to Deb, I'm glad as Johnny that you're home. Tracy, hi, good to see you. Thank you for checking in. Melissa, courtesy of Canadian Thanksgiving. Excellent, excellent. Canadian Thanksgiving is the gift that keeps on Thanksgiving. Paula, hey, sweetie. Paula is one of my favorite people, and she's married to another one of my favorite people, the writer Michael Marshall Smith. So the two of them together make two of our favorite people. Lori, Jazua has always been one of your favorite characters. Oh, thank you. I enjoyed Jazua too. Jazua, like Rini Sulaweo, is a character who, we all take bits and pieces of ourselves and plug them into characters or use them as a jumping off point for creating characters. But I would say in a lot of ways that Jazua and Rini Sulaweo from the Otherland books are two characters who took very strongly from certain characteristics of myself. In the sense that they both have an exaggerated sense of responsibility for everybody around them, and I do say exaggerated because I'm aware of it in my own life that, other people manage to somehow survive even when I'm not around. But there's a part of me that's never quite certain that that's going to be true, and I'm one of those people who's always like, did you remember to do this? And don't forget that. And my mom, who we just lost about a month ago, was the world's premier worrier. And I've told these stories. I will probably tell them at her memorial whenever we have it. She was just the master of thinking of things to worry about. And she inculcated this into me starting at an early age. For instance, the first time we ever took my golden retriever to the beach, this is decades ago now. First time we ever took Gala, the dog, to the beach, my mom said, do me a favor, and if the dog goes out in the water, don't swim too close. And I was like, what the hell? I said, what do you mean, Mom? Why that? She goes, I'm pretty sure that from underneath, a golden retriever looks a lot like a harbor seal, and that's what great white sharks like. I went, oh, okay, wouldn't have thought of that one, but all right. And then even more to the point, we, when I was married the first time, we went to Mexico. And when we came back, my ex had been very, very bitten by jellyfish. There had been a jellyfish incursion, I don't know, whatever you call it, when a bunch of jellyfish get swept in toward shore. And my ex had been stung nastily in a number of places. And so my parents picked us up at the airport. and we're telling, all the things that happened and mentioned this, and my ex is showing, the welts on her legs and stuff. And my mom said, oh, what you should have for that is meat tenderizer. I said, meat tenderizer? She says, oh, yeah, for things like that and bee stings and stuff, that's the best thing to have. And I went, yeah, Mom, but who carries meat tenderizer around with them? And she reaches into her purse and pulls out a jar and goes, I do. Which just kind of, that so perfectly summed up my mom. It's like if anybody would have a jar of meat tenderizer in her purse in case of jellyfish. Now, living in a landlocked area, that was my mom. Somehow telling a story about my mom has just made me go out of focus. I don't know why. Anyway, so back to the thing. So Josua and Rini, who are both world-class warriors, very definitely are constructed from an aspect of my character that I either inherited or was shaped by my mother. Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get this thing to focus on me again. There we go. Okay. Anyway, Angie. I keep saying that. Angie, hi, good to see you. Polly, hello. I'm glad you got back. And Isaac says hello again from Logan. Okay, very good. Claudia, hello. And Carl, same to you. And Kristen, hello. Kristen's trying. Been out drinking, huh? Yes, that's hello is not usually spelled Helki, but that's okay. That's all right. This is Liberty Hall. Whatever you want is okay with me, and I will accept all spellings, just as I accept all pronunciations. Anita Nunez says, my fiance is a streamer, and his grandmother often wanders in. I'm glad you were being offered food instead of being asked for help with her window sewing, removing the cat. You can tell that they were very concerned because normally nobody comes in here when I'm doing these readings. It's kind of like this superstitious thing. Like, not that I think anybody would care. I know they wouldn't care. But I remember one time Deb and I were on the phone with a friend. This wasn't a formal reading, but we were on the phone with a friend in England doing a Skype. Max, one of our young people, was literally crawled through the room behind us. And of course, once you see somebody crawling through the room behind you with their butt up in the air, you can't help but just stop what you're doing. So poor Max was trying to avoid attention while he was on the way to presumably the bathroom, because we got a bathroom down here in the office. And and first Deb stops talking, and then I stopped talking, and then our friend in England stopped talking, and we were all just sitting there staring as this went along the back of the thing. A human bottom in pajamas was kind of going bloop, 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 past. Anyway, so this time Max was clever, and he stayed in the doorway and asked me. Okay, I almost said it again. All right, who have I not said hello to? Annie, hello, good to see you. And Jeremy, missed a bus, but he's a little bit late. Yeah, and here now I was going to try and get finished with saying hello to people early, and I wound up telling stories, and so now I'm just now getting started on my reading. So apologies for all that. Okay, Polly says, I just got the biggest thrill. Felt like I got called out on Romper Room. Yeah, I don't know how long you've been watching these reading broadcasts, but when I first started and would go down the list and say hello to people, that was the first thing that occurred to me also, was how much it was like being Miss Nancy on Romper Room, Magic Mirror, show me today, have all my friends had fun at play, or whatever it was she used to say. And apparently there were many, many Miss whatevers. I don't know if they were all Miss Nancy or if they all had different names in different locations, because back in those days it was kind of like a franchise. Romper Room, they were local franchises or something. But anyway, so yeah, that's when I first started doing this. That was my first thought too, was this is like Romper Room, which is okay. I'd rather it was like Captain Kangaroo, which was my favorite show from that time. I was just watching a thing about Captain Kangaroo on YouTube or something the other day. What a great guy Bob Keeshan was. That's the guy who played the captain. Again, those of you who are younger than me may not even know who Captain Kangaroo was, but he was sort of the children's television figure, and far more wonderful than pretty much anybody except for Mr. Rogers and then later Sesame Street and, but I mean, compared to most other programs, the Captain Kangaroo show was just head and shoulders above the others in terms of just its openness, its kindness, its sweetness, its putting the children first since they were the audience and not talking down to them and all kinds of things. Captain Kangaroo was a great show, and Bob Keeshan was a really wonderful host and inventor. I mean, he invented that show and really in a lot of ways invented children's television. Oh, and Deb must be watching because she has just chimed in with Steve from Blue's Clues. Absolutely. Steve from Blue's Clues was A-OK too. He was the closest to Captain Kangaroo in terms of that sort of feeling of connection of anybody that I know that the younger generation had access to. And Angie says she remembers the Captain and Mr. Green Jeans. Yes, indeed, Mr. Green Jeans, who, no, he was not Eddie Haskell. He was not Frank Zappa's dad. He was an actor. And a very good one, but he wasn't anybody's famous connection. Anyway, so back to the Dragonbone chair. That's what we're reading, and we are in the middle of, I think, chapter 22, which is called A Wind from the North. The tabor rattled, and the lute player plucked a gentle chord before beginning the last verse. And now dost thou come, my lady fair, in candory cloth and silks withal? Then if thou wouldst rule o'er my heart, take foot now and follow to Emetten's hall. The musician finished with a flurry of delicate notes, then bowed as Duke Leobardus applauded. Emetten's hall, the Duke said to Eolair, Count of Nadmulloch, who followed Leobardus's example with his own dutiful applause. Secretly, the Hernistier man felt sure he had heard better. He was not much taken by the love ballads that were so popular here in the Nabanai court. I am fond of that song, the Duke smiled. His long white hair and pink cheeks gave him the look of a favorite old great-uncle, the sort who drank too much stout at the Aidentide feasts and then tried to teach the children how to whistle. Only the flowing white robe, trimmed in lapis and gold, and the golden circlet on his head with its mother-of-pearl kingfisher proclaimed him as different than ordinary men. Come, Count Eolair, I thought that the music was the lifeblood of the Teg. Does not Luth count himself Ostenard's greatest patron of harpers? And your Hernistier the natural home of musicians? The Duke leaned across the arm of his sky-blue chair to pat Eolair's hand. King Luth does indeed keep his harpers beside him at all times, Eolair agreed. Please, Duke, if I seem preoccupied, it is in no way due to any stinting on your part. Your kindness has been indeed a thing to remember. No, I must admit I am still bothered about the matters we discussed earlier. A look of concern came to the Duke's mild blue eyes. I have told you, my Eolair, that there's a time for such things. It is very wearing to have to wait, but there you are. Leobardus motioned to the lute player, who had been waiting patiently on one knee. The musician rose, bowed, and moved off. His fantastically intricate garment flounced around him as he joined a group of courtiers, similarly garbed in sumptuously embroidered robes and tunics. The ladies had supplemented their outfits with exotic hats, winged like seabirds, or crested like the fins of bright fish. The colors in the throne room, like those of the courtiers' costumes, were muted. Tasteful blues, yellow beiges, pinks, whites, and foam greens. The impression was that of a palace built from delicate sea stones, everything smoothed and softened by the clutch of the ocean. Beyond the gentlemen and ladies of the court, taking up the whole southwest wall facing the Duke's chair, were the high arched windows that looked out over the active, sun-tipped green sea. The ocean, which threw itself ceaselessly against the rocky headland on which the ducal palace perched, was a vibrant, living tapestry. Watching through the day as the moving light danced on its surface, were revealed patches of still sea as heavy and translucent as jade. Eolair frequently wished to sweep the courtiers from the way, send them tumbling and squeaking from the room, so that nothing would obscure his view. Perhaps you are right, Duke Leobardus. Eolair said at last. One must stop talking sometime, even when the subject is a vital one. I suppose, sitting here, I should be taking a lesson from the ocean. It doesn't need to work hard to get what it wants. Eventually it wears the rocks away, the beaches, even the mountains. Leobardus liked this sort of conversation better. Ah, yes, the sea never changes, does it? And yet it is always changing. Well, that's true, my lord, and it is not always quiet. Sometimes there are storms. As the Duke cocked his head toward the Hernister man, unsure whether this remark meant something more than was immediately obvious, his son Benegaris strode into the room, nodding briefly to some of the courtiers who greeted him as he moved toward the Duke's chair. The Duke, my father, Count Eolair, he said, bowing once to each. Eolair smiled and put out a hand to clasp Benegaris's. It's good to see you, the Hernister man said. Benegaris was taller than when he had last seen him, but the Duke's son had then been only 17 or 18. Nearly 2 decades had passed, and Eolair was not displeased to see that, despite his being a good 8 years the elder, it was Benegaris who had thickened around the waist, not he. Nonetheless, the Duke's son was tall and broad-shouldered, with intent dark eyes beneath thick black brows. He made quite an imposing figure in his belted tunic and quilted vest, an energetic contrast to his affable father. "Yeah, it has been a long time," Benegaris agreed. "We shall talk at supper tonight." Eolair did not think he sounded very excited at the prospect. Benegaris turned to his father. "Sir Fluiren is here to see you. He is with the Chamberlain at the moment." "Ah, good old Fluiren. There's irony for you, Eolair. One of the greatest knights Naban has ever produced." "Only your brother Camaris was ever called greater," Eolair interrupted, not adverse to resurrecting the memories of a more martial Naban. "Yes, my dear brother." Leobardus smiled a sad smile. "Well, to think that Fluiren should be coming to see me as an emissary of Elias." "There is a certain irony," Eolair said lightly. Benegaris curled his lip with impatience. "He's waiting for you. I think you should see him quickly, as a gesture of respect to the High King." My. Leobardus turned an amused glance toward Eolair. "Do you hear my son order me?" When the Duke turned back to Benegaris, Eolair thought there might be something in Leobardus's gaze beside amusement. Anger? Worry? "Yes, then, tell my old friend Fluiren I will see him. Let me think. Yes, in the council hall. Will you join us, Eolair?" Benegaris leaped in. "Father, I do not think you should invite even so trusted a friend as the Count in to hear secret communications from the High King." "And what need, may I ask, is there for secrets to be kept from Hernistir?" the Duke asked. Anger had crept into his voice. "Please, Leobardus, I have things I must do anyway. I shall walk in later to say hello to Fluiren." Eolair rose and bowed. As he stopped on his way across the throne room to look one more time on the splendid view, he heard the voices of Leobardus and his son raised behind him in muffled argument. "Waves make more waves, as these Nabani say," thought Eolair. "It looks as though Leobardus's balance is more delicate than I thought. Doubtless that is why he is so unwilling to talk frankly with me about his troubles with the king. A good thing it is that Leobardus is a tougher stock than he appears to be." He heard the courtiers whispering behind him and turned to see several of them looking in his direction. He smiled and nodded. The women blushed, covering their mouths with their flowering sleeves. The men nodded gravely and quickly looked away. He knew what they were thinking. He was a curiosity, a rustic and untutored Westerner, even if he was an old friend of the Duke's. No matter what he wore or how perfectly he spoke, still they wouldn't feel the same. Suddenly, Eolair felt a deep longing for his home in Hernistir. He had been too long in foreign courts. The waves rushed against the rocks below. as though the sea would not be satisfied until its monstrous patience had at last brought the palace tumbling down into its watery grasp. Eolair spent the rest of the afternoon strolling the high, airy hallways and meticulous gardens of the Sancellan Maestrevis. Although it was now the Duke's palace and the capital of Naban, once it had been the seat of man's whole empire in Ostenard. Diminished in importance now, still its glories were many. Perched on the rocky knob of the Sancelline Hill, the palace's western walls overlooked the sea, which had always been Naban's lifeblood. Indeed, all of Naban's noble houses used water birds as the symbols of their power. The Benedrivian kingfisher of the current Duke's line, the Praven osprey, and in Gadarene albatross. Even the heron of Sulis that had once flown, briefly, over the Hayholt in Erkenland. East of the palace, the city of Naban itself spread down the peninsula's neck, a crowded, swarming city of hills and close quarters, thinning at last at the peninsula, as the peninsula widened out into the meadows and farms of the lakeland. From the known world to this peninsular duchy and bridal veil of island possessions, Naban's vistas had narrowed, and its rulers had turned in on themselves. But once, not too long ago, the mantle of the Nabani imperators had covered the world, from the brackish Ran to the farthest reaches of icy Rimmersgard. In those days, the wrangling of osprey and pelican, and the strivings of heron and gull had carried as their reward a prize worth any risk. Eolair walked in the Hall of Fountains, where jets of glimmering spray arched up to commingle as a fine mist beneath the open latticework of the stone roof, and wondered if there was yet the will left in the Nabani to fight, or whether they had simply come to terms with their own gradual diminution, so that Elias's provocations only served to drive them further into their beautiful, delicate shell. Where now were the men of greatness like those who had carved Naban's empire out of the rough stone of Ostenard? Men like Tiagoras or Anatoles. Of course, he thought, there was Chimerus, a man who, had he not found in himself a stronger call to serve than to be served, might have held the willing world in the palm of his hand. Chimerus had been a mighty man indeed. And who are we Hernister men to speak? Eolair wondered. Since Hern the Great, what mighty men have risen up in our western lands? Taptane, who took the Hayholt from Sulis? Perhaps. But who else? Where is Hernistir's Hall of Fountains? Where are our great palaces and churches? But, of course, that is the difference. He looked out past the streaming fountains to the cathedral spire of the Sancellan Aedonitis, the palace of the Lector and Mother Church. We at the Hernisteri do not look at the hill streams and say, how can I bring that to my home? We build our homes beside the stream. We do not have a faceless God to glorify with towers taller than the trees of the Kirkoil. We know that the gods live in the trees and in the bones of the earth, and in the rivers that splash high as any fountain, racing down from the Grinsbog mountains. We never wanted to rule the world. He smiled to himself, remembering the Teg at Hernus Adharc, a castle made not of stone, but wood, oak-hearted, to match the hearts of his people. Really, now, all we want is to be left alone. Still, with all their years of conquest, perhaps these Naban folk have forgotten. Sometimes you have to forget, you have to fight for that, too. As he left the room of fountains, Eolair of Nad Moloch brushed past 2 Legion guardsmen coming in. Bloody hillman, he heard one of them say, eyeing his garb and horsetail of black hair. Hey, you know, the other replied. Every now and then the sheep herders need to come in and see what a city looks like. And how is my little niece Miriamel, Count? The Duchess asked. Eolair was seated at her left hand, near the head of the long table. Fluiren, as a more recent arrival and a distinguished son of Naban, had the place of honor on the right of Duke Leobardus. She seemed well, my lady. Did you see much of her while you were at the High King's court? The Duchess Nesselanta leaned toward him, raising an exquisitely drawn eyebrow. The Duchess was a sternly beautiful older woman, although how much of that beauty was due to the skilled manipulations of her hairdressers, seamstresses, and ladies' maids, Eolair had no way of guessing. Nesselanta was exactly the kind of woman who made Eolair, no stranger to the company of the fairer sex, feel completely out of his depth. She was younger than her husband the Duke, but she was the mother of a man well into his prime. What here was lasting beauty, and what was artifice? Then again, what did it matter? Nesselanta was a powerful woman, and only Leobardus himself held greater sway over the affairs of the nation. I was not often in the princess's company, Duchess, but we had several chances to speak at supper. She was as delightful as ever, but I'm thinking she was already very homesick for Merrimond. The Duchess popped a corner of her trencher bread into her mouth and then delicately licked her fingers. It was interesting you should mention that, Count Eolair. I have just had news from Erkenland that she has returned to the castle at Merrimond. She raised her voice. Father Deniven? A few seats down, a young priest looked up from his meal. Although his scalp was shaved in the monasterial style, the hair that remained was curly and rather long. Yes, my lady? He asked. Father Deniven is his sacredness the Lector Renessen's private secretary, Nesselanta explained. The Hernisteer man made an impressed face, and Deniven laughed. I don't think it's creditable to any great wit or talent on my part, he said. The Lector also takes in stray dogs. Escritor Velagus gets very upset. The Sancellan Aedonitis is not a kennel, he tells the Lector, but his sacredness smiles and says, Neither is Ostenard a nursery, but the benevolent Lord lets his children remain for all their mischief. Deniven waggled his bushy brows. It's hard to argue with the Lector. Isn't it true, the Duchess said as Eolair laughed, that when you saw the king, he said his daughter was gone to Merrimond? Yes, he did, Deniven said, more serious now. He said she had taken ill, and the court physicians recommended sea air. I'm sorry to hear that. Eolair looked past the Duchess to the Duke and old Sir Fluiren, who were conversing quietly amidst the uproar of supper. For a refined people, he reflected, the Nabani certainly enjoyed loud table talk. Well, Nesselanta pronounced, sitting back in her chair as a page scurried up with a finger basin, it just proves that you can't force people to be what they're not. Miriam has Nabani blood, of course, and our blood is as salty as the sea. We are not meant to be taken away from the coast. People should stay where they belong. And what, the Count wondered to himself, are you trying to tell me, my gracious lady? To stay in Hernisteer and leave your husband and your duchy alone? To, in effect, go back to my own kind? Eolair watched Leobardus and Fluiren's discussion wistfully. He had been maneuvered, he knew. There was no gracious way he could ignore the Duchess and insinuate himself into their conversation. Meanwhile, old Fluiren was at work on the Duke, transmitting Elias's blandishments. And threats? No, probably not. Elias would not have sent the dignified Fluiren for that. He had Guthwolf, the king's hand, ready for use whenever such a tool was called for. Resigned, Eolair made light talk with the Duchess, but his heart was not in it. He was sure now that she knew his mission and was hostile to it. Benegaris was the apple of her eye, and he had been avoiding Eolair all evening. Nesselanta was an ambitious woman, and doubtless felt the fortunes of Naban would be better assured if they were yoked to the power of Erkenland, even a domineering, tyrannical Erkenland, instead of the pagans of Hernisteer. And, Eolair realized suddenly, She has a marriageable daughter herself, the Lady Antippa. Perhaps her interest in Merimel's health is not just that of a kindly aunt's for her niece. The Duke's daughter, Antippa, was pledged already, he knew, to one Baron de Vesali's, a foppish-looking young nobleman who at this precise moment was arm-wrestling with Benegaris in a pool of wine at the far end of the table. But maybe Nessalanta had her eye on greater things. If Princess Merimel will not or cannot marry, Eolair mused, then perhaps the Duchess has eyes for Fangbald to marry her daughter instead. The Earl of Falshire would be a much finer catch than any back-road Abanai baron, and Duke Leobardus would then be tied to Erkenland with cords of steel. So now, the Count realized, there was not only Josua's whereabouts to worry over, but Miriamel's as well. What a tangle. Just think how old his Grimner would see this, with all his complaints about intriguing. His beard would catch fire. Tell me, Father Deniven, the Count said, turning to the priest, what does your holy book have to say on the art of politicking? Well, a look of concentration momentarily clouded Deniven's homely, intelligent face. The Book of the Aedon speaks often of the trials of nations. He thought a moment more. One of my favorite passages has always been, if your enemy comes to speak bearing a sword, open your door to him and speak, but keep your own sword at hand. If he comes to you empty-handed, greet him the same way. But if he comes to you bearing gifts, stand on your walls and cast stones down on him. Deniven wiped his fingers on his black cassock. A wise book indeed, nodded Eolair. Chapter 23, Back into the Heart. The wind flung rain into their faces as they ran eastward through the darkness toward the hidden foothills. The clamor of his Grimner's camp receded, muffled in a blanket of thunder. Coursing across the wet plain, Simon's panicked exhilaration began to recede as well. The ecstatic sensation of energy, the feeling that he could run and run through the night like a deer, was gradually cooled by the rain and relentless pace. Within half a league, his gallop had slowed to a fast walk. Soon even that was an effort. Where a bony hand had clutched his knee, he felt the joint stiffening like a rusty hinge. Bands of pain around his throat throbbed at every deep breath. Morghennes sent you? Later, Simon, Benedict gasped. All told later. They ran and ran, tripping and splashing over the sodden turf. Then, Simon panted, then what were those things? The attacking things? Even as he ran, the troll made an odd hand-to-mouth gesture. Bookin, diggers they are, also called. What are they? Simon asked, and nearly slipped on a patch of mud, skidding for a moment flat-footed. Bad, he grimaced. There is no more needs telling now. When they could run no longer, they walked, trudging on until the sun edged up behind the wash of clouds, a candle behind a gray sheet. The Weldhelm stood before them, thrown up in relief against the pallid dawn like the bowed backs of monks at prayer. In the meager shelter of a cluster of rounded granite boulders, set starkly in the sea of grass as though in imitation of the hills beyond, Benedict made a sort of camp. After walking around the rocks to find the spot most sheltered from the shifting rains, he helped Simon down into a space where two boulders leaned together, forming an angle in which the boy could recline with some minimal comfort. Simon quickly fell into a limp, exhausted sleep. Flying raindrops skipped from the tops of the boulders as Benedict crouched, tucking in the boy's cloak, which the troll had brought with their other things all the way from St. Hodoran's, then rooted in his pack for some dried fish to chew, and his knuckle bones. Kantaka returned from an investigatory tour of the new territory to curl up on Simon's shins. The troll took the bones out and tossed them, using his pack bag for a table. The shadowed path. Benedict grinned a bitter grin. Then, masterless ram. And, again, the shadowed path. He cursed, quietly but lengthily. Only a fool would ignore such a clear message. Benedict knew himself to be many things, and foolish was occasionally one of them, but here, now, there was no room to take such chances. He pulled his fur hood back up around his face and curled in beside Kantaka. To any passing by, if they could have seen anything at all in the faint light, and with rain in their faces, the three companions would have looked like nothing so much as an unusual dun-colored lichen on the lee side of the rocks. "So, what kind of a game have you been playing with me, Benedict?" Simon asked sullenly. "How do you know of Dr. Morganes?" In the few hours he had slept, the pale dawn had turned into a cold, gloomy morning, unredeemed by campfire or breakfast. The sky, swollen with clouds, hung close overhead, like a low ceiling. "It is no game I am playing, Simon," the troll replied. He had cleaned and bandaged Simon's neck and leg wounds, and was patiently seeing to Kantaka's. Only one of the wolf's injuries was serious, a deep slash on the inside of her foreleg. As Benedict picked grit from the skin, Kantaka sniffed at his fingers, trusting as a child. "I have no regret for not telling you. If I had not felt forced, still you would not know." He rubbed a fingerful of salve into the cut and then turned his mount loose. She promptly bent and began licking and biting at the leg. "I knew she would do that," he said in mild reproach, then mustered a careful smile. "Like you, she is not thinking I know my work." Simon, realizing he had been unconsciously plucking at his own bandages, sat forward. "Come, Benedict, just tell me. How do you know of Morganes? Where do you really come from?" "I am from exactly where I say," the troll replied indignantly. "I am a Canuck, and I am not merely knowing of Morganes. Once I met him. He is a good friend of my master. They are colleagues, I think the learned men say." "What do you mean?" Benedict sat back against the rock. Although at the moment there was no rain to shelter from, the cutting wind alone was reason enough to stay close to the outcropping. The little man seemed to be considering his words carefully. He looked tired to Simon, his dark skin loose and a shade paler than normal. "First," the troll said at last, "you must be knowing something of my master. He was named Ukekok. He was the singing man, you would call him, of our mountain. When we say singing man, we mean not someone who is just singing, but someone who is remembering the old songs and old wisdom, like doctor and priest joined together, it seems to me. Ukekok was my master because of certain things the elders thought they were seeing in me. It was a great honor to be the one sharing in Ukekok's wisdom. I went 3 days without eating food when I was told just to make myself of the right pureness." Benedict smiled. "When I announced this pridefully to my new master, he hit me on my ear. 'You are too young and stupid to be starving yourself on purpose,' he said to me. 'It has presumptuousness. You may only starve by accident.'" Benedict's grin split open into a laugh. When Simon thought about it for a moment, he laughed a little too. "In any way," he continued, "I will be telling you someday about my years learning from Ukekok. He was a great fat troll, Simon. He weighed more than you, and he was being my height only. But now the point must be reached sooner. I do not know with exactness when my master first met Morganes, but it was long before I came to his cave. They were friends, though, and my master taught Morganes the art of making birds carry messages. They had much talk in letters, my master and your doctor. They shared many ideas about the world's ways. Just 2 summers gone, my parents were killed. Their death came in the dragon snow of the mountain we call Little Nose, and once they were no more, I devoted all my thinking, well, almost all, to learning from Master Kekok. When he told me this thaw, that I was to be accompanying him on a great journey south, I was filled with excitement. It was clear seeming to me that this would be my test of worthiness. What I was not knowing, the troll said, poking up the muddy grass before him with his walking stick. Almost angrily, Simon thought, but there was no anger to hear in his voice. What I was not told was that Ukekuk had more important reasons for traveling than the finish of my apprenticeship. He had been receiving words from Dr. Morganes and some others of things that disturbed him, and he felt it was time to be returning the visit Morganes had made on him long years before when I first was with him. What things? Simon asked. What did Morganes tell him? If you are not yet knowing, Benedict said seriously, then perhaps there are still truths you can do without. On that I must think, but for now let me say what I can, what I must. Simon nodded stiffly, rebuked. I will not either burden you with all the long story of our southward trip. I was realizing quite early on that my master had not given me all the truth either. He was worried, much worried, and when he cast the bones or read certain signs in the sky and wind, he became even more so. Also, some of our experiences were very bad. I have traveled by myself, as you know, much of it before becoming a servant of my master Ukekuk, yet never have I seen times so bad for travelers. An experience much like yours of last night we were having just below the lake Jorsholven on the frost march. You mean those bookin? Simon asked. Even with daylight around them, the thought of the clasping hands was terrifyingly vivid. Indeed, Benedict nodded, and that is being a bad sign that they should attack so. It is not in the memory of my people that the Boghanik, which is our name for them, should assault a group of armed men. Bold it is, and frighteningly so. Their usual way is to be preying on animals and solitary travelers. What are they? Later, Simon. There is much that you will learn if you have patience with me. My master did not tell me all either, which is not saying, please notice, that I am your master, but he was very much upset. In our whole journeying down the frost march, I did not see him sleeping. When I would sleep, still he would be awake, and the morning would find him up before me. He was not young either. He was old before I came to him, and several years I was by him studying. One night, when first we had crossed down into the northern parts of your Urkinland, he asked me to be standing watch so that he could walk the road of dreams. We were in a place much like this. Benedict gestured around at the bleak plain below the hills. Spring arrived, but not yet broken through. This would have been, perhaps around the time of your All Fools' Day, or the day before. All Fools' Eve. Simon tried to think back to remember. The night that terrible noise awakened the whole castle. The night before the rains came. Kantaka was off hunting, and the old ram, One Eye, a great fat patient thing he was to carry Ukekuk, was sleeping by the fire. We were alone with just the sky. My master ate of the dream bark that came to him from the marshy ran in the south. He crossed over into a kind of sleeping. He had not told me why he was doing this, but I could guess he was searching for answers that he could find no other way. The Boghanik had frightened him because there was wrongness in their actions. Soon he was mumbling, as he was usually doing as his heart walked the road of dreams. Much was not understandable, but one or two things that he said were also said more lately by Brother Dochais, which is why you may have seen me show surprise. Simon had to restrain a sour smile, and he had thought that it had been his own fear which was so obvious, sparked by the Hernistir man's delirious words. Suddenly, the troll continued, still poking fixedly with his stick at the spongy turf, it seemed to me that something had caught at him, again with likeness to Brother Dochais. But my master was strong, stronger in his heart, I think, than nearly anyone, man or troll, and he fought. Struggled and struggled he did, all the afternoon long and into the evening, as I was standing beside him with no help to give but to wet his brow. Benedict pulled a handful of grass, tossing it into the air to bat at it with his staff. Then, a little past the middle of the night, he said some words to me, quite calmly, as if he were at drinking with some other elders in the clan cave, and died. It was, for me, I am thinking, worse than my parents, because they were lost, just vanished in a snow slide, gone with no trace. I buried Ukekuk there on a hillside. None of the proper rituals were correctly done, and that is a shame for me. One Eye would not leave without his master. For all I can know, he may be there still. I am hoping so. The troll was quiet for a while, staring fiercely at the scuffed hide on the knee of his breeches. His pain was so close to Simon's own sorrow that the boy could think of no words to say that would make sense to anyone but himself. After a while, Benedict silently opened his bag and proffered a handful of nuts. Simon took them along with the water skin. Then, Benedict began, almost as if he had not stopped, a strange thing happened. And since it's still several pages of Benedict talking about the strange thing, I think I'm going to have to pause there, because we are just now at 8 o'clock straight up, or darn close to it. So, excuse me. Anyway, so I thank you for joining me. And again, I apologize. I'm always apologizing. I apologize for doing so much babbling at the beginning. I always wind up talking for like 20 minutes, and then I only have like 40 minutes to read. I would read longer, but that's about how long my voice lasts before that's before things start to go wrong. Sarah, I'm just laughing at Sarah's comment. Sarah says, it is my fervent belief that if Gudrun had been around at the start, she had pulled Elias by the ears and thrown Priorites out, all doom averted. Well, yes, and if Rachel the dragon had been allowed to put some teeth in domestic Hayholt law, the same thing probably would have happened. She would have given Elias a spanking, and she would have thrown Priorites out on his red butt. So either one of those two formidable ladies would have dealt things a lot better than the people who were in charge did, but that's often the case. Anyway, thank you so much. Yes, I'm wearing my Radiohead t-shirt, which I can read when I look in the mirror, but can't read right now. Well, I can. It says, anyway, I promised I wasn't going to say that anymore. Anyhow, thank you for joining me. Great pleasure, as always. I will be back next week, first for the 1 a.m. Sunday 1 a.m. reading, and then again for this slot, the 7 p.m. reading. If you miss any of them, you are welcome to go check them out either on my social media, or Chris Fab is putting them up on YouTube, as many of you probably know. And that, oh, let me see, there's another question here. Kristen says, Tad's message board, tadwilliams.com, still working? The last I saw, there was a problem with the message board, but I have not checked back in the last several days because I was gone and came back and been working and all that stuff. So I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I will find, I'll get some answers and find out. So I'm not sure, Kristen, what's going on with the message board. Anyway, if any of you have questions, by the way, I'm always open to getting questions on Facebook or through Twitter. So feel free. And as I said, one of these days I'll get my Instagram up and running. It's just, there's just so much to do and so little Tad and Deb to do it all. But anyway, so thank you for joining me. Be good to yourselves, take good care of yourselves and your loved ones, friends, and neighbors. And we will strive to do our best here on our end. And with that, I say good night, peace, and great to see you as always. Good night.